an interest in this region. And we are beginning a collaboration with them to have a center for the development of applications and to train people in Apple technologies. And like this, I could go on through other very important technology companies internationally. So we are trying to understand where the technology is going. We are seeing, okay, now how can we use this technology locally? And we are training people, developing these local skills so that they can bring solutions that we will benefit our society. That is the role that as a research lab we have been doing for the last 11 years, and data science is one of our main activities. So thank you very much. I just wanted to give you a brief introduction to what we are doing here, and thank you for the big support and for your interest and the work that you are doing in bringing technology and making Kenya to be the hub of the region, and I would say of the continent, in technology. Thank you.
And I will now, it's quite tall. And I will now call upon the Strathmore University Vice Chancellor, Dr. Vincent Ogutu, to make his remarks. Welcome, sir. Tumkaribishe Kikenya na kwa makofi.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, our CS for Investments, Trade and Industry, Rebecca Miano, the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretary General, Wamkele Mene, the US Ambassador to Kenya, Meg Whitman, our University Council Chair at Strathmore, Mrs. Bernadette Musundi, our iLab Director, Dr. Joseph Sevilla, distinguished guests, it is my great pleasure to welcome you today to this summit, to the pre-summit on data science and artificial intelligence, with a particular focus on how we can use IT to promote trade in Africa. Now, it's interesting that we have the ambassador of the US here. The US is known largely as the paragon of democracy in the world. And I think President Ruto will agree that we have a special brand of democracy here in Kenya, which we're leading Africa in. And it's about democratizing knowledge. So in the continent, I dare say we're #1 in democratizing knowledge using technology. So gone are the days when you needed a lot of money to access knowledge and skills. If you have raw talent, and we have an abundance of that in Kenya, then all you need is that little push, that leverage that can give you access to incredible knowledge and opportunities for building your skills. Now, this came home to us in a very special way when COVID happened. 3 weeks before the first case in Africa was reported, Dr. Sevilla walked into our office with the Vice Chancellor at that time, Professor Odhiambo, myself, and we had a meeting in which he told us, this thing that's happening in China and in Europe is going to spread to the whole world. And it's just a matter of time before the whole world, including Kenya, goes on lockdown. We were very skeptical at first because there were only 2 cases in Africa at that time, I think in Egypt and in Nigeria. It seemed so remote and far-fetched. But he insisted, it is coming, it will happen, and what will we do then? Will we shut down? And we said, do you have ideas? He said, we'll have to migrate to an online platform. Thankfully, all our students already have devices. We give them laptops when they join Strathmore. We have the online platforms that we can use, and we were going to get licenses to increase the capacity. What was lacking was training our lecturers in the ability to do that, to teach online and to have our students learn how to learn in real time online. And that is something that iLab Africa and our Deputy of Vice Chancellor, Academic and Student Affairs, Elizabeth Gashenga, is here. They all embarked on this training program, an ambitious training program to just rush everyone through this training. And sure enough, 3 weeks later, the first case was reported to Kenya, and the president put the whole country on lockdown, and we were actually asked that Monday to shut down the university. So we told everyone, go home, be safe, we'll give you time to reach home. The following Monday, classes resumed. So we were the first institution in Kenya to resume educational services. And then part of what we did was to address the limitation that we had. We had the online platform, we needed cheap internet. So we created a data bundle that would be a quarter the cost of the data bundles that were being sold by Safaricom. And they told us, oh no, they'll be watching Netflix and YouTube. We said, not really. The same way you can blacklist a website, you can't go to this pornographic website. You can whitelist websites. You can say, these are the only websites that you can go to. And so we started whitelisting websites like Wikipedia, Strathmore.edu, Zoom.com. We just whitelisted the ones relevant to education, created this package in collaboration with Safaricom, and rolled it out for the use of everyone in the country, not just Strathmore. So I'm telling you all this just to let you know how much Strathmore tries to use the knowledge that we have here to serve our country. And now we have the privilege to serve our continent as well. I'm so pleased that you're here, Secretary General, and we really want to promote trade in Africa. That will help all these different economies to grow and then to provide the much needed services that the respective countries need. And we are happy to provide our expertise in technology to make that possible. So I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us today as our President launches this summit and launches this very important discussion that we have. We enjoy the partnership that we have with you. We could never do it alone. The reason you come to a university is because it's a trusted space. It is an institution that simply wants the truth to be known, to be understood, to be leveraged for progress. We have no political agenda, no any other agenda you might think of, except to just advance the cause of progress and science and humanity. And so that's why you come to us. We're a hub where we bring together government and industry and communities. And you play your part in whichever way it is by helping us tap into your knowledge, tap into your expertise, the resources that you can give us to make all these ambitious projects become a reality. So thank you very much for your presence here today, and I welcome you all very warmly to Strathmore University.
Next, I'll call His Excellency Wamkele Mene, the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretary General. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremonies, Your Excellency President Ruto, Cabinet Secretary, Your Honor, Vice Chancellor of the University, the senior leadership of the university, private sector, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, High Commissioners and Ambassadors, I want to also recognize High Commissioner of Kenya to Ghana, High Commissioner Marine, who's here with us. I'm most grateful to be here today because of what Professor said, and that is that universities are at the heartthrob of societal critiquing and advancing societies. And in particular today, the focus is on digitization and how we can ensure advancement of our continent, deploying digital tools and enhancing our digital skills to boost intra-Africa trade. And allow me a few minutes to just set out to you what we have done in the AfCFTA Secretariat and what we will continue to do to deploy digital skills to accelerate the integration of our continent. In May 1963, our founding mothers and fathers met in the historic city of Addis Ababa. And the principal objective, of course, at that time was to defeat colonialism, push back colonialists. And as I always say, with the defeat of apartheid in South Africa, our founding mothers and fathers arguably achieved their objective, except one. And that is the integration of our continent. And so if you review the founding instruments of the Organization of African Unity, they say Africa must establish a single payment system, that Africa must establish an integrated market. This is in May 1963. And so under the leadership of our heads of states and government, we are beginning to put into action those founding objectives of the Organization of African Unity. And what is interesting is, as far back as May 1963, our founding fathers and mothers said, we have a continent that has 42 currencies. How do we make sure that we trade? As we speak, in order to trade, if you are in Kenya, you want to trade with somebody in Ghana, where I live, you have to buy a third currency. So we trade amongst one another using a third currency, and the cost, or currencies, and the cost we estimated to be close to $5 billion annually. So what we have done, working with Afrexim Bank, under the leadership of Professor Orama, is to introduce to our heads of states and government the payments and Pan-African payments and settlement system to enable digital payments in local currency. Wherever you are on the African continent, you trade in your own currency. This is a significant step forward in digital innovation, in ensuring that we deploy digital skills and tools for inclusive trade. The majority of beneficiaries of the Pan-African payments and settlement system are small and medium enterprises and young entrepreneurs who cannot afford the cost associated with currency convertibility. This is a very important development in the history of our continent that resonates, as I say, with the founding objectives of the Organization of African Unity. It is, of course, a matter of regret that it has taken us this far to advance on some of those long-standing objectives. The second observation, again in respect of digitization and digital tools, the ministers of trade are currently negotiating a protocol on digital trade. That protocol on digital trade will provide the regulatory framework, the legal framework, the market access for digitization of the African continent, as well as establish the requisite digital infrastructure to ensure that the millions and millions and millions of young Africans who are at the cutting edge of digital innovation, that there's a platform to support their work. I hope by the end of the year, the ministers of trade will conclude negotiations of this protocol, and then we present it to our heads of states and government in February next year for them to adopt it, and we begin to implement the protocol. And some of the features of the protocol include payments, data flows so that data can flow, can be processed, managed, and moved around the African continent. It is estimated that Africa by the year 2035 will require 700 data centers. And those data centers must be located throughout the African continent so that we spread the benefits. More and more young Africans are trained as software engineers, and we transition Africa's economy completely to become a digital economy, as is predicted, where we deploy and aggressively implement the protocol on digital trade. And so Africa has an opportunity. We have a very, very unique opportunity in accelerating digitization. I was saying the other day that there is no reason why Africa cannot be as competitive or even more than Dublin on data centers, on management of data, and flows of data. This is the lifeline of our continent going forward. And so the mandate and what we are launching today under the leadership of His Excellency the President entirely resonate and is consistent with not just the objectives of the AfCFTA, but the long-standing objectives of the Organization of African Unity. The third point that I would mention, again in respect of digitization and trade. President, I was invited by Frank, the former CEO of Trademark Africa, then it was called Trademark East Africa, to visit the port of Mombasa. And what I saw was remarkable, how the East African community and Kenya, in terms of innovation for custom systems. You could be at the port and there is a digital center that tells you how many trucks are coming in, how many trucks are leaving the port, improving the efficiency to a very, very large extent. Now, if we look at across the African continent, the reality is that the story is not the same. So we have to rely on Kenya and the EAC to lead in the area of custom systems digitization. There are some parts of the continent where there is a one-stop border post. The immigration officials, the customs officials are seated next to each other. But the pile of paperwork is this high. And that is because of lack of interoperability of systems, lack of digitization of systems to enable more efficient trade. And so we have a very ambitious project to introduce digitization of custom systems, modeling on what has been achieved here in Kenya and the East African community. Here, I was told when I visited the port, 15 years ago, it used to take from the port of Mombasa to Kigali, Rwanda, it would take 15 days or 14 days. And today, it takes 2 or 3 days for those goods to be cleared and to arrive in Kigali, Rwanda, one stamp, a very, very efficient system. So the model of digitization that you have developed certainly is a model that we should be rolling out throughout the rest of the continent. In West Africa, Abidjan-Lagos trade corridor, the distance is 1,000 kilometers, 1,080 kilometers. It takes 15 days and 37 checkpoints for goods to move 1,000 kilometers. Clearly, there is a need to improve our trade corridors, looking at the success stories that have already taken place across the African continent. And so we look forward to working with you as a university, as thinkers, as research, to help us in the innovation of digitization of trade. I'm just a trade lawyer. I know nothing about digitization, so we require your expertise to help us to advance. Let me close on this note. I mentioned 1963, May, the history of the Organization of African Unity and what was foresaw. Last week, some of you may have seen an article in the New York Times, and it was entitled, "The World is Becoming More African." And so the New York Times tells us something that some of us already knew anyway, but tells us that by the year 2050, Africa's combined GDP is estimated to be 16.2 trillion United States dollars. And that by 2050, the turn of the century, the largest working force in the world will be in Africa. And third, that the youngest population in the world will be here on the African continent. But these positive projections will remain nothing but that if we do not move aggressively to integrate our continent, to integrate the market, to become more globally competitive, and to ensure that we create opportunities for young Africans here. And so I am most grateful the leadership of the African Union, His Excellency President Ruto. Every time he speaks, he mentions the AfCFTA. We were here a few months ago during the session of the American and Kenya Chamber of Commerce Summit, and we listened very, very carefully to the vision that the President has in engaging the private sector to work together to create opportunities here on the African continent. So I want to thank all of you very much for your attention, and I wish all of us good deliberations over the next day or two. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency Wamkele Mene. At this point, allow me to now welcome the Cabinet Secretary for Trade, Investment and Industry, Madam Rebecca Miano, who will in turn invite His Excellency. Why don't we welcome her with a clap? Welcome, Madam Rebecca.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Before I invite His Excellency to speak, I'll just share with you very paradoxical data that paints Africa, where we are, and how digital trade will close these gaps. We all know that Africa's percentage of global population is 17%. And Africa's percentage of global landmass is 20%. Africa's percentage of global arable land is 65%. Africa's percentage of global renewable fresh water is 10%. And Africa's percentage of global natural resources and minerals, including renewable energy, is 30%. That's the Africa we are talking about. But Africa's percentage of global GDP is only 2.8%. Africa's percentage of global trade, just 3%. Africa's percentage of global passenger traffic is another 2.4%. Africa's percentage of global manufacturing is another 2.8%. Africa's percentage of global energy consumption, just about 3%. And finally, Africa's percentage of global food supply is just about 8%. And therefore, the discussions that we are having today, the discussions on research and innovation and digital trade, will go a long way in closing these gaps and moving from the 2%, the 1%, to double-digit percentages, And I do believe, truly believe, that the discussions that are going on here, and even together with the Secretary General, will pay dividend very, very soon. I want to congratulate Strathmore University for all the work that they are doing. And I am very happy to note that the AfCFTA is soon concluding the protocol on digital trade, and that will be catalytic in improving the figures that I have given. Your Excellency, as I welcome you, I want to inform you that the brains in this room can easily resolve and sort out and blow out all the problems we have in Africa. It's now my pleasure, my singular pleasure, to invite His Excellency to address this gathering. Karibu sana, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much, everybody. Let's take our seats. The Vice Chancellor of this great university, Dr. Ogutu, and the university leadership, Excellencies, honorable members present, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I want to thank each and every one of you for finding time to participate in this inaugural conference on Africa Continental Free Trade Area and engage with the most important fundamental issues in terms of Africa's overdue economic transformation. We are at a historic juncture in world development in which Africa, at long last, is emerging as a focal point of important global strategic discourse with tremendous political, security, environmental, and most importantly, economic implications. Throughout the modern age, Africa has been profiled as a troubled continent which abounds with immense potential, limitless possibilities, but year after year, overcoming these challenges and actualizing potential has remained a very elusive target. Consequently, Africa has continued to rank unfavorably when it comes to participating, contributing, and competing in the global economic space relative to other regions. As Minister Miano has said, Africa only accounts for 3% of global trade because a stronger performance is prevented by disjointed and fragmented markets. Besides other structural deficiencies and historical legacies which undermine sound institutional development, impede efficiency, and limit the possibility of robust economic growth and transformation. Historically, the continent has been afflicted by colonial tyranny, economic exploitation, and political instability, which have hindered Africa's ability to participate fully in global trade and benefit from its own resources. Although politically sovereign, economically we have been trapped in a vicious cycle of underdevelopment and want, now compounded by a huge debt trap and a runaway climate crisis. The profile of Africa has been so pessimistic that its endowments were deliberately cast in despairing light. Africa's resources were portrayed as a curse that would only bring conflict and bloodshed instead of wealth and progress. Africa's growing youthful population was similarly represented as a ticking time bomb that would explode into intense poverty and endless fighting. Even Africa's forests and other resources were not spared. Despite an indeed very often, because of its abundant endowments, Africa has been persistently underrated, underrepresented, and relegated to the margins of economic discourse while being at the center of negative political conversation. These conversations are changing, and I'm very happy that we are changing the narrative about Africa. And the narrative is changing because we have learned to tell our story as Africans. Much of the difficulty encountered by many countries arose from international economic and financial system configured to sustain a rigid development pathway. Consequently, resources typically flew in one direction, on the cheap, to the benefit of the powerful industrialized nations, which control the levers of the system today, while finished products are afterwards imported to these same countries in our continent at a price that make utter mockery of our endowments, our aspirations, and our progress. At the center of all discourse concerning Africa's relative underdevelopment and low economic performance in the midst of such staggering plenty is the question: why is a continent that is larger than all other continents and land masses combined, which is home to over 1 billion and a bit people, and sits at all these resources, contributing only 3% of global trade and only 0.8% of global GDP? That is the question we need to answer. That is the question we've been working hard to answer. And this is the question we need Strathmore and the center that's going to be set up here to help us answer. As soon as one reflects upon this question, it becomes clear that there exists a connection between Africa's underperformance in absolute and comparative terms and the equally low levels of intra-Africa trade and investment. Let me give you examples. Between 1995 and 2017, intra-African trade grew from 10% to 17%. That is a period of 22 years. For perspective, consider that the next lowest region in regional trade is North America at 31%, then Asia at 59%, while Europe stands at 69, almost 70%. There lies the issue. We speak about EAC because, and that's what Michaela here was referring to, we have tried to tear down the barriers to East African trade. And that is why today EAC, intra-EAC trade within the countries in EAC is at about 27%, the highest in the continent of Africa. But compared to where other regions are, you can see that we have so much ground to cover. The EU is a highly integrated market with a parliament, judiciary, and a single currency. And this unity is amply reflected by its GDP and levels of regional trade, investment, and integration. It has been clear for a while now that strengthening unity of African and deepening economic integration on a continental scale would confer on us tremendous opportunity and benefits on a scale commensurate with our stature, profile, needs, and aspirations. A decade ago, therefore, the African Union laid down the agenda to guide our endeavors to achieve this goal by 2063 through a development roadmap which envisions an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the international arena. This agenda explicitly sets out the direct connection between Pan-African unity, economic development, and peace and security, at once exposing the fundamental economic drivers of our failures and fundamental economic vision as the engine of unprecedented African transformation. Today, Africa is beginning to hum with the energy unleashed by the unfolding of innumerable opportunities, thanks to regional and Pan-African integration. Trading has commenced under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And even in these early stages, the potential to rapidly grow intra-African trade beyond earlier projections is very evident. Many firms are going back to the drawing board because the full implications of the huge scale of this platform are beginning to emerge. A seamless market of 1.4 billion people, launching off to a GDP of 3.4 trillion, is a tremendous start by all accounts. It is projected to increase incomes by at least 7% throughout our 54 countries by 2035, thereby lifting over 30 million people out of poverty. There is much optimism and excitement as we embark on a new chapter in Africa's economic journey. The launch of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area marks a significant milestone in our pursuit of economic transformation across our continent. The time for Africa's economic transformation and industrialization has come, and we must execute a transition from merely supplying world markets with raw commodities to broad spectrum of value-added contributions, including tradable services, as well as embracing the rapidly evolving digital technologies to accelerate economic growth and create employment opportunities for the continent's burgeoning youth population. The AfCFTA, therefore, provides a crucial opportunity for Africa to define the terms and conditions under which we shall pursue African self-sufficiency with the aim of actualizing authentic African self-determination. Under the African Continental Free Trade Area, we have a chance to transform our continent into a global economic powerhouse and elevate the lives of millions of African citizens. It is projected that the AfCFTA could create 2 million additional jobs and lift a market of 1.4 billion people, as I said, and a combined GDP of US $3.4 trillion, thereby creating unprecedented opportunities to accelerate economic growth and transformation, foster regional integration, and improve the lives of millions of Africans. We must see the Africa Continental Free Trade Area as more than just an economic integration initiative and a trade agenda. It is also a powerful symbol of Africa's unity and determination to chart its own path towards prosperity, and represents a revolutionary paradigm shift in our approach to development, where innovation, collaboration, and cooperation takes center stage. It signifies our commitment to breaking down borders, bridging divides, and mobilizing the nations and people of Africa to aspire collectively and strive in unity towards a shared destiny. By eliminating trade barriers, boosting intra-Africa trade, and promoting investment, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area establishes a conducive environment for commerce and industry to thrive, unleash the entrepreneurial spirit of our people, and stimulate economic diversification and industrialization. It will enable African countries to capitalize on their comparative advantages and establish regional value chains essential for sustained economic development. The AfCFTA is driving the emergence and definition of fresh global perspectives of Africa as a unified socio-political and economic entity, and as a result, everybody from statesmen and diplomats to investors and entrepreneurs are beginning to normalize a Pan-African track in their strategies, which shifts the scale and horizon to undertaking a new paradigm. Today, after this meeting, in fact, in a few minutes, I will be meeting the Prime Minister of the Czech Republic, who is in Kenya because, in their own words, they are revising their strategy for Africa. Because they now see exactly what I'm talking about. The reverberations of AfCFTA are intense and have caused walls, barriers, and obstacles to collapse and give way to bridges, ladders, and pathways to opportunity to reverse the current trends in poverty, inequality, and underdevelopment in our continent. And this is why this summit in Strasbourg is important, because we want to bring on board the intellectual capacities that we have, the space around trade, and the leverage we can get from technology to come into play so that we can leapfrog some of the challenges others have had and be able to tap into the space that exists, turn our potential into opportunity, and opportunity into tangible benefits for our continent. With a median age of 19, Africa is the youngest continent that is growing younger every year. Millions of educated and purposeful young people stand in need of meaningful employment. A life of poverty in the midst of all the evident untapped potential is totally unacceptable for these young people. AfCFTA gives us the opportunity to transform Africa's youth bulge from a ticking time bomb to a generational asset and a demographic dividend. African countries have natural resources that are typically extracted and exported as raw materials for production abroad. Africa also has abundant renewable energy resources that are clean and green. We are literally the zero carbon factory of the world in waiting. We are not just waiting, but preparing eagerly for the opportunities to employ our youth, attract investment, grow manufacturing industrialization potential, and power the next phase of global green industrialization revolution. Even as our governments, corporations, and individual entrepreneurs engage with the tremendous opportunities arising out of our continent's vast potential, it is important for forums like this to lead the way in continuously developing, refining, and providing high-quality, evidence-based, data-driven analysis, strategies, policies, as well as other varieties of essential knowledge and insights that enable both public and private sector leaderships to make smart choices and take sound decisions in order to initiate and sustain ambitious transformation on a continental scale. You occupy a very special place in making us succeed. And I agree with Minister Miano that the body of knowledge and expertise that we have in our universities, starting with Strathmore, could close the gaps that we have much faster, much more efficiently, if we created the correct networks and worked with our institutions seamlessly. In other words, we are not going to take chances with this unprecedented moment in the history of global development. Rather, we are investing in and supporting the development of relevant strategic, analytical, and advisory bandwidth to make sure that our public and private sectors enjoy sustainable access to the best intellectual capacity and resources available as they formulate policies, strategies, and set out to succeed in a brave world that we all want to be part of. This is how I contextualize the launch of the AfCFTA Policy and Development Center here in Strathmore, which signifies Kenya's readiness to support Africa's transformation through robust complementary activity in the academic and scholarly space. While the role of such an institution is fairly straightforward, its critical importance will continue to manifest itself as Africa coheres into a fully fledged political and economic global player of strategic significance. So it may start small, as it certainly will, but I am very confident that further down the road, its space, its capabilities will be evident. It is good to start early. I know maybe we are asking ourselves whether we've started, we've not done the correct homework, maybe we've not done things as we should. But let me encourage you and tell you this. It is good to start early. Wole Soyinka, our foremost African elder, admonishes us that you must set forth at dawn. And our young people here in Kenya paraphrase it to say, mapema ndio best. So, even as we behold the magnitude of Pan-African integration, we must also undertake domestic transformation, not only to drive rapid economic growth, but also to create sustainable local capacity to exploit every emerging opportunity at the national, regional, or continental levels. So you're in the right space. I just want to encourage Vice Chancellor here and the university. And I also want to persuade you, therefore, that our bottom-up economic transformation agenda is both a coherent, standalone, self-sufficient plan for unlocking opportunities in Kenya to drive unprecedented economic development, and also a mechanism to enhance our national capacity to participate meaningfully in Pan-African investment, commerce, trade, and also in the industrial space. We want to be ready to work, invest, manufacture, and trade at every level, in every sector throughout our continent. We understand Pan-African integration in the form of AfCFTA and the Agenda 2063 as a perfectly aligned extension of our bottom-up economic transformation agenda. And that is why we are involved in it, we are immersed in it, and Secretary General will confirm that Kenya is front and center driving this African integration agenda. Early this year, in February, during the Ordinary Assembly of Heads of State and Government, we adopted accelerating the implementation of Africa Continental Free Trade Area as the overarching theme for this year. I am delighted by the great momentum to rally and establish key institutions that will enhance the implementation of this program. It is also encouraging to learn that an important facility, the AfCFTA Adjustment Fund Corporation, has already been launched and is domiciled in Kigali, Rwanda. And here today, we are launching one of the most critical institutions that will significantly catalyze the implementation of AfCFTA, the AfCFTA Policy and Development Center here in Strathmore. We recognize the importance of policy development in driving the success of Africa Continental Free Trade Area. It is also through strategic, well-crafted policies that we can create an enabling environment for business to thrive, facilitate investment flows, and promote fair and equitable trade practices. The role of the Center will be instrumental in this regard, providing a platform for research, analysis, and evidence-based policy making. We intend to tap into this resource, not just as Kenya, but as EAC and as the wider body of the African continent. As we embark on this journey, it is essential to acknowledge and keenly examine and attend to the challenges that lie ahead. To begin with, we must tackle issues related to infrastructure development, regulatory harmonization, human capital development, and the facilitation of cross-border trade. According to the African Development Bank, Africa needs to invest between $130 and $170 billion annually in infrastructure for the next decade. This center will need to figure out how this is going to happen, what levers we need to use, what instruments will come into play so that we can attain these targets. The AfCFTA will serve as a catalyst for these investments, since improved transport, energy, and digital connectivity will significantly reduce trade costs and naturally enhance efficiency. To support this agenda, I see a major role for the Policy and Development Center here in Strathmore in terms of designing sustainable investment models and public-private sector arrangements that effectively mobilize stakeholders, governments, and regional economic communities to develop effective policies that drive inclusive, and sustainable development in the whole space that we are seized with. Secondly, it is essential for us to sustain skills and development and promote continuous learning as a strategic priority throughout Africa. Africa's youthful population is projected to increase exponentially to 1.7 billion in the next 7 years and 3 billion by 2063. I am convinced, beyond any doubt, that the youth are the future and our greatest asset. By investing in education, vocational training, and research and development, we can unlock the innovative potential of our youth, equip them with the necessary skills for the future, and keep them at the forefront of Africa's economic transformation. I am very sure that universities, starting with Strathmore, are doing exactly that. And I am saying so not from hearing. I am saying so because 2 members of my family have actually been through this university. So I am speaking from knowledge, and I'm speaking from experience. And so that's what must happen continuously with all our other universities. Furthermore, it is imperative that we foster a categorically pro-business environment characterized by transparent and predictable regulations, robust legal frameworks, and protection of intellectual property rights. This will attract foreign direct investment, encourage local entrepreneurship, incubate innovation, and promote responsible business practices that create quality jobs and contribute to sustainable development. And I am completely aligned with what the Secretary General of AfCFTA mentioned on 2 issues. The easing of trade, especially on payment of goods and services in our continent. How do we marry the efficiency of our trade with which happens in different currencies? And in the Africa Heads of State Assembly in February next year, we will be adopting the Pan-African payment system that has been crafted by Afreximbank as the instrument that is going to allow this continent to trade in our local currencies and avoid the unnecessary loss of about 5 billion shillings in trying to transact in different currencies. So we are properly aligned. In fact, Kenya is a champion, and we've been asked to host the headquarters of the Pan-African payment system in Kenya. And because we are leaders in the technology space, and because we are also promoters of African Continental Free Trade Area, and any institution that supports the integration of our continent, we have gladly accepted to host the headquarters of the Pan-African payment system in Kenya. Let me also confirm that technology is going to play a very important role. And that is why I agree that the ministers are going to conclude on making sure that we bring legislation, we bring regulation, and we agree on how technology is going to support our trade capabilities and possibilities. And as a result, the whole tech space is a space that we must pay very special attention. And it is the reason why I traveled to America, to the Silicon Valley, with the assistance of my good sister Meg, so that we can speak the language of technology to the leading companies globally. It is the reason today the chair of iLab here says Apple is looking at opportunities in Kenya. They have never imagined that they can look for opportunities in Kenya. But because of the profile we have created, because of the pitching that we have made, and because even them, they can now begin to see opportunities in Africa, because that's where the future is. We are now beginning to leverage on interests in our continent. I want to confirm that Kenya is already aligned in terms of data centers. We've already committed 1,000 acres in Naivasha for the development of data centers with green energy, because we believe that this is a service that we do not need it just for Kenya. We need it also for the region, and this is one export we can also export globally. This is one export we can export to America, and we can balance our trade, and we can export to Europe. And that's a space that we intend to take charge and make sure that we deliver on it. And so technology is going to play a big role, making sure that our business people are not unnecessarily encumbered by looking for this currency and that currency to be able to trade. We will try and see whether we can take that out of the equation so that they can concentrate on enhancing trade between all our countries. So we are properly aligned. We are, Kenya is in the right space for us to be able to move this forward. And I want to ask all our institutions to work with us in building the institutions that will support our progress, that will support our development nationally, regionally, and globally, because we need the input of everybody. I believe that the launch of the Africa Continental Trade Area Policy and Development Center represents a pivotal moment in Africa's development journey. It provides a platform for us to work together in a borderless, cross-sectoral, multidisciplinary, and inclusive manner to build a prosperous future in which Africa is a globally competitive driver of world economic affairs. And